Sal Capaccio in to join us here on a Wednesday. Good morning, everybody. Jeremy and Joe. Joe's off the rest of the week. He's off on Buffalo Bills football Monday as well, so we'll get Joe back on Tuesday. Bills and Dolphins this week. We're, of course, talking post-deadline, the deadline that was for some teams and that wasn't for many others. And Sal joins us here on the Western Hotline. Good morning, Sal.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, Sal. When the day finished out, are you ultimately surprised that the Bills did not make a move, that the Patriots, that the Chiefs, that some of these teams at the top of the AFC, that it was a little more quiet of a trade deadline than many had anticipated?
Yes, and yes. I was surprised that the Bills did not make a move at the end of the day. Now, I came on here and said many times what the barriers were to that, right? And we all knew that. And we could talk price point and all that, and that's always subjective. There is a true and real barrier of salary cap, but you can also manage that and make it work in some way, shape, or form, depending on a lower level type of salary and bring them in, and you could definitely make that work. So I'm not saying it's impossible at all, but certainly some barriers. That said, I thought that there would be a deal done. In fact, on It's Always Game Day in Buffalo with Matt Bove and me, the last episode we did, I set the over-under at 1.5 on trades for the Bills for Matt. I think he went over. I think he said he thought they would have two of them. So I think that's where our heads were. That's where my head was going in. Then on top of that, I mean, I look at it and go, okay, what's happening here? Well, the Bills didn't make any moves. Neither did the Chiefs. Neither did the Patriots. Neither did the Steelers. Like teams that
Broncos.
You felt Broncos were rumored to be the most aggressive team out there, and they didn't do anything, right?
Yep.
It felt like the teams that were there that wanted to make something happen, if you try to step back and say, why is that? Well, I think maybe just the price point of those teams and where they are and, the players that they wanted to acquire to help them probably seemed a little too high for some cases, and then salary cap in the Bills' case and maybe others as well. So, yeah, I was surprised at the end of the day that the Bills did not and all those other teams did not.
Yeah, you wonder if one team had made a deal for a big price, if that would have maybe opened the door for the others. And I kind of, Sal, thought that maybe the Colts trade and the Cowboys trade, like, hey, first-rounders are flying around here. Maybe GMs will feel a little bit like, all right, you know what, let's get in the game here. Indianapolis went with 2 firsts for Sauce Gardner and A.D. Mitchell for Sauce Gardner, and yet here we are, like still nothing. So I don't know if I'm not necessarily surprised the Bills didn't make a massive swing. I'd kind of talked myself into it being possible, but I am surprised there wasn't like a middle-of-the-road deal, if you want to talk about the Shaheed deal or some other defensive player to come in, because immediately afterward we find out that Casey Toohill and Kingsley Jonathan and Garrett Nelson. So three players come in for workouts, meaning like they're going to add somebody. I'm surprised that they didn't think or couldn't find to add somebody to a roster spot that might have cost them a 4th or a 5th round pick.
Yeah, so really interesting. So nothing official from the Bills yet from what I've seen, but this is from the NFL Transaction Wire, so that's what's going to happen, right? So We'll probably get notice on some of this stuff today, but really more of the guys that are already under contract. They won't tell you the guys came in for tryouts. They don't do that. But I'm looking at this as a big picture, Jeremy, which is why release Jimmy Charlo and Christian Wilkerson? Well, and then bring in guys, the 3 defensive ends essentially that they did for tryouts. Kingsley Jonathan, who knows this system, who's been here, who's done some decent things when he's played. Syracuse guy, for those who remember him. He went to Chicago, came back to Buffalo, went to Houston, I think maybe Jacksonville. I can't remember after that, but it's been a few stops. Garrett Nelson, and then Casey Toohill, who's also been here. And they're all 3 defensive ends. So what this tells me is I think that would have been the area the Bills would have concentrated the most here at the trade deadline. And I do think, though, it is tough to probably get the kind of player they were looking for. And what I believe they were looking for, this is my interpretation of just how the roster is shaped and what they've been doing. I don't think the Bills need a true defensive end. But if they do, then they have to have an internal solution to interior pass rush by one of those guys kicking inside. It's really more of a defensive tackle, defensive end hybrid is what they need, right? Because that's what they lost in Michael Hoyt. Michael Hoyt's not a true defensive tackle, but he plays inside. I think the Bills, when everything was percolating about Von Miller last night, right?
Yeah.
And I know, like, people rolling their eyes, and I get it. I mean, it's Von Miller. He's older. He has 4 sacks this year. His pressure numbers aren't that bad. But what that told me was they're looking for somebody to either bring in to replace what Michael Hoyt's role was, or somebody they bring in that then they can move somebody on the roster to do that. You know what I mean? And kind of move the role around. That's the role I think they were concentrating most on. When it came to wide receiver, now you have Christian Wilkerson, who's going to get released here, it looks like. That might be a move for Gabe Davis. Maybe Gabe, maybe there's just not enough reps or whatever, so you want to, and Gabe's getting more. Who knows where that could be? It could be anything, I guess. But that being said, everything started percolating about Deebo Samuel yesterday. I thought, like, man, I don't know. Are they really going to do that? I mean, that's just kind of more of the same of what you have. And, boy, they're really, really leaning into the yards after catch thing. I don't know how real that was, how real it wasn't. It never felt like that was like an area that they were going to target necessarily. I guess it could have definitely happened. Then we would have been like, okay, what's going on here? Real quick, though, I want to say, like, when people talk about Garrett Wilson and Jalen Waddle, I mean, those things are just – I almost feel like I'm wasting my time talking about the Bills trading for them. Like, what? No, the Jets were never going to trade Garrett Wilson to the Bills, and I don't think the Dolphins were going to trade Jalen Waddle to the Bills, right? I mean, people think about these things, and, yeah, they're fun to think about and fantasize about as a wide receiver coming in, but that just doesn't make sense to me why a team would do that. And I know they're on expiring contracts maybe in some situations when you trade with your division, not even in the case of like Garrett Wilson who signed the extension. But you don't want to hand your division rival a guy that they could sign to an extension, in that case even, further and play him. So it never made sense to me that was ever going to happen.
Yeah. That's why Olave was probably someone we keyed in on more because he's in the NFC, and same with Shaheed there. And then there's, of course, like the Brian Thomas Jr. rumblings. Could they have been after him a little bit? Quite possibly. I'm seeing from the New York Post the price for Waddle appears to be a 1 and assets. So not two ones, but like a 1 and something else. And I'm not sure if the Bills would have called, whatever, like asking prices and all that. Sal, like the deadline here for Brandon Beane, he's got a good team. There's no doubt about that. I'm surprised that the good teams didn't make more noise here. I'm curious to get your thoughts on the Colts deal, making the trade for Sauce Gardner with a pair of first-round picks and A.D. Mitchell. There's no doubt it's a steep price. Do you respect it? Do you think it's ridiculous? Like, where do you land on what the Colts did for a premier cornerback?
Well, I obviously think that, you give them credit for going for it for sure. You wonder if they're kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit, though, and saying, okay, we're going to do this now, and it's really going to cost them later. I mean, that's a really heavy price to pay. And, Sauce Gardner is a really, really good player. I don't know. Are they good enough throwing the ball, though, to say – I mean, to me, their defense is pretty good already. Their running game is really good. Now you're moving on from A.D. Mitchell, which it seemed like that was just never a fit for them, and there was a lot going on there, right? I think that was just kind of what was going on. And now, are they good enough throwing the ball? I know Daniel Jones has some nice numbers, but is that a good enough passing offense? And I wonder just kind of roster construction from their point. But I think philosophically, Jeremy, you always have to kind of tip your cap to a team that says, hey, we're here, and I don't know if we're going to get here again, so let's go for it right now.
Yep.
Which I think gets us back to the original point, and you talked about it this morning a lot, which is the teams that didn't do it. Where you think the teams that kind of are right there and have the ability should, but those teams also could be sitting back and going, we're here and we will be back again. And I know that's a chicken and egg, right? That's a philosophical, should you do that or not? I'm not super intimate with the Colts roster, but I heard somebody say yesterday, like, they are a little aging, right? This might be their chance to do this now because, you're catching lightning in a bottle. So why not do it now? They have some youth on their team. There's no doubt about it. But even like Jonathan Taylor's not the youngest running back, right? And he's really, really good. They built a nice offensive line. There's some vets there, a couple of young guys. But I mean, I want Zaire Franklin is an older player. Like, some of their better players are older. And you wonder if maybe that's why they did something like that. From the Jets side, yeah, I mean, smart move by the Jets for sure. But, I mean, this is what they do all the time, every few years. It's rinse and repeat. And they draft players. They get all this war chest, as they say, of draft picks. And the players they draft, a few years later, they wind up moving on from and doing the same thing over again. Why? Because they don't have the quarterback.
Yeah.
As simple as that. They get the quarterback that's going to look like the greatest trade ever in the history of the Jets.
Which they probably will get. I mean, they're going to be near the top of the draft with multiple firsts to move up. Like, they'll have a real good look at drafting first overall, and we'll see if they can get to the first overall spot.
But I'll say, Jeremy, they had Sam Darnold.
Oh, right, and they had Zach Wilson. Right, they drafted a quarterback number 2, number 3. Sanchez was number 6.
It's if the quarterback works out from both sides. Can they develop him?
Yeah.
Can they surround him? And can that player be good enough? Right, all of that has to matter, as we know. that's not an easy science sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. On the Colts, you talk about their passing game. I'm looking at some EPA per play numbers for the Colts. The Bills have the number 2 offense in football. Number 1 is Indianapolis. And an EPA per pass, the Bills are 7th and the Colts are 8th. So, for what it's worth, the Colts pass game might be every bit as good as the Bills pass game. And the quarterback, I don't think anybody thinks is nearly as good. So we'll see. We'll see if Indy can be a little bit more serious here. Sal Capaccio joining us on the Western Hotline. Sal, who will we hear from today as we kind of get back to, a regular week, a Sunday 1 o'clock game against Miami, right back to it. The Dolphins, of course, they fired their GM, and everyone's going to pick the Bills to win by 1 million. So who do we hear from today, and what are we looking for on the injury report? Daquan Jones, Josh Palmer, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it is a normal Wednesday. Now, typically, after the trade deadline, we have heard from Brandon Beane, but that's also because the Bills have made moves over the last few years, right? And I don't know if that's going to be the case today because there's really no reason to talk if there's no moves made, I guess, right? I don't know. So it is possible that is the case. But that being said, Sean McDermott will speak to the media a little before noon. Then the team will be on the practice field. Then we'll hear from players afterwards in the locker room. And yes, it is Miami week, right? Always a fun week. And I know a lot of people going down to South Florida, and I love the fact that this is a Sunday 1 p.m. game in November. Chance for Western New Yorkers to kind of get some sun and get a nice weekend down there in South Florida. And obviously the Miami Dolphins are in a reset mode as well. And I was actually surprised they didn't do more, Jeremy, to be honest with you, the Dolphins. Like I thought they were going to trade anything nailed down, right? They did wind up trading Jalen Phillips, nice player.
Minka Fitzpatrick, Nick Chubb, Bradley Chubb.
Yeah, I thought they would do that, and they didn't do that. And look, it's still a team that still has a lot of weapons on offense. And Devon Achane and Jalen Waddle, and they still have an offense that can spread you out and have a lot of speed. And it was funny when I talked to Sean McDermott last Friday on the Extra Point Show for his weekly radio interview. I asked about defending Kansas City. He unprompted brought up how they're similar to Miami like that, right? So I think that the Bills view that offense, Miami, very similarly to how they view Kansas City in defending them. And we know the quarterback's different, obviously, but they do have a lot of speed and they can spread you out. So it is still a game that they have to go down there and take care of business. And right now they're in a position where they got to win games. They got to stay pace with New England and the rest of the AFC. And the Colts fell back a game last week. New England's got a tough one in Tampa this week. Then Tampa comes here. So the Bucks are the Tampa Bay Bucks might have a lot to say about what happens in the AFC East over the next few weeks. But the Bills will be back on the practice field today. You asked about injuries. Going back to Monday, so everybody knows, Sean McDermott basically said that Daquan Jones, Taron Johnson, Joshua Palmer, and who else am I missing? All basically going to see how the week, Gabe Davis, going to see how the week goes for all of them. And he basically alluded to all of them practicing in some capacity this week.
All right. Sal Capaccio on the Western Hotline ahead of Bills, Dolphins. And what percentage of Bills fans this week, Sal? You think like 80%? Is it going to be the takeover of takeovers? I'm like, it usually is. Joe's going for the first time, which is great. I'm happy for him to get that kind of. It's a rite of passage for Bills fans to get down to Miami.
It is always. By the way, Shaq Thompson was the other guy I was thinking of, though. He expected to do some work this week. It is always packed down there in the stadium with Bills fans, and I will tell you though, of all the cities and stadiums and teams that we visit every year and go to, this is like one of the most front-running fan bases that you'll find, which what I mean by that is when the Dolphins are pretty good or in the mix or it's early in the year, the Dolphins fans are a little bit more of the Dolphins fans and less of the Bills fans, even though there's a lot of Bills fans, right?
Yep.
Once you get to where the Dolphins are like, people are checking out and that they're 2-7, I mean, they are really checking out. And there's a lot going on in South Florida. I mean, Jeremy, there's a nightclub inside the stadium that people go into and just party instead of watch the game. I mean, that's what we're talking about in South Florida anyway, in every game. And I mean, so I'm expecting a lot of Dolphins fans to be like offloading their tickets to Bills fans who want to go in this situation.
Yeah, well, it'll be a good one. Good times for Bills and Dolphins. And the Thursday night game is Vegas and Denver. We'll see. Like Denver was another team, Sal, we thought could add at the deadline. Sean Payton said they did not come close to a deal. He's also kind of saying the same thing the Bills are. For the Broncos, it was said to be receiver that they might have chased after. So, receiver's a position that moved a little bit, but not too much for this deadline. I'm also kind of stunned that – sorry, if you want to get something in there.
I just want to say I agree. Like that organization I felt would be aggressive, and Sean Payton is just, him, being the head coach there. And it feels weird because I feel like they have good receivers, but like Waddle was the guy they were most connected with, I felt yesterday, right? And then that just it never materialized for them.
Yeah. Hendrickson stays with Cincinnati. Stunned?
Yeah. No, I'm never stunned by anything the Bengals do. Honestly, like right, I mean, like it feels like they kind of just make decisions to make decisions, and it's not for any rhyme or reason to better the future or the present. It's more of a because let's be honest, they probably should have traded him, right? I don't know what the compensation they're asking for or the number. It feels like unless they really believe that he's going to resign there, then I could understand and they could keep him. But man, their defense is so bad. They traded Logan Wilson. Man, their defense is just terrible.
Their record, I saw Sal, the Bengals record when they score 38 in the last 2 years is 1-3. When they score 38.
That is amazing, right? That is amazing. Yeah. So I mean, that's another guy that probably the asking price was probably super high. He's a really good pass rusher at a good age. So that would have been really high for them. And I know that, the big reaction from Bills fans yesterday was about receiver, and I get it. Yep. Like, I thought they might add there. I really did. The guy I wanted was Shaheed if the Bills were going to do it. I thought, and that's a really nice pickup for the Seattle Seahawks, but Shaheed to me would have fit really well on this roster because he's also a return man, and right now their return man is inactive pretty much most of the time. So you kind of could have added speed to the receiver room. You add playmaking ability, add a return man, but however that worked out or didn't work out, whether the Bills were in it, I don't know. But that was the guy there, and obviously the Bills are what they're ultimately saying is they believe that they have enough solutions on the roster to go forward with the receiving core, and we'll see if that happens. And this is on them now to be right about that.
Yeah. Do you think we'll get any sort of update on Gabe Davis today? Like he got the injury after the one practice. He's got a little bit swollen. Like is he? I don't know, Sal.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see him out there or not. That'll be the thing, Jeremy. Like the one thing you have to remember with Gabe is because he's on the practice squad, he doesn't show up in the injury report. You know what I mean? Like only active players show up on the injury report or guys coming back from injured reserve.
Right.
But since Gabe is on the practice squad, yes, I expect Sean McDermott to tell us beforehand what he's going to do. But then when we go out there, we'll be able to see what he's doing,
right.
And we'll get a little feel for that.
Feels like a matter of time before he's going to dress for a game. So, and he might give them, an upgrade. He might give them a little bit more outside than they have been getting. So, we'll see if that's in the cards. Also, Josh Palmer, of course, we're going to watch him. All right, Sal, thanks very much.
All right, you got it, buddy.
Sal Capaccio on the Wester Hotline on the trade deadline that was and wasn't.